All right. Welcome
All
back
right.
to another episode of the Burning Veil podcast. I am your host Gideon, and this is my guest co-host for the day.
It's Nick Lay. Nice to meet you all.
It is a pleasure to meet you as well. We've actually kind of been talking for the past hour off recording, getting the organic flow of life as we do. But I reached out to Nick and we kind of started talking and we got this idea for
Oh yeah.
an episode. And it is about a malevolent evil dark creature that, oh boy, buckle up. This is going to be a mess.
Drum
The
roll.
only drum roll, yeah. The only information you will ever find is other than this episode right here is a podcast episode from Talking with Shadows. Marcus D and Vic Waitley did a really, really good job on this, and I knew about it beforehand because I had a personal experience with it, as well as I have a eyewitness that I spoke to a couple weeks ago and jotted her story down. She didn't want to come on the show, unfortunately. Big tear, big sad face, because it gave her a lot of
Oh.
trauma. And she's currently still in counseling after 15 years after this has happened, because it has given her
15 years.
15
Wow.
years ago, and it's given her a long PTSD issue to the point where she can't even have a partner, like a boyfriend. She can't even have anybody really touch her much because it bothers her. So, are you ready to get into
Yeah,
this
that's definitely
malevolent
trauma.
evil? Yes, that is some bad trauma, and my heart goes out to her.
Absolutely. So strapped for it.
So, Nick,
Absolutely.
I guess we should start with an introduction. And I wrote a small one.
Definitely.
I wrote a small one out. You can grade me on a scale of 1 to 10, of 1
Okay.
being it's trash, 10 being you nailed it on the head like a god. The Wretch. The Wretch is a very interesting creature to me personally, as it has so many qualities that are unlike anything else that I've seen in lore and in books and in research. It's strange as there is only one source that I have personally ever found anywhere, even on the World Wide Web, just one. And I find that is odd, as it has messed with the lives of quite a few friends, family, and even just people that are strangers to me and you. And that is my introduction. Dark and malevolent.
I grade you a 11 because I have found nothing on the Wretch except for one bit, and I think that's solid.
I thought
Wretch.
so. I thought so. So I also wrote a description because somebody had to, and I've compiled this over eyewitness testimonies, my personal friend of mine, and then Talking with Shadows, the podcast episode of Talking with Shadows with Marcus D and Vic Waitley that did this same topic. I recommend going and watching that for more on it. But the description that I have best compiled is: the Wretch is seen as a very sick human and either transparent or only half transparent, depending on who you are. And in one case, it's been seen as both as once by two different people in the room. So we're talking this thing has been transparent to one person in the room, but all there in by another. That gives off some weird vibes.
No, that's interesting.
I agree.
Yeah, that also kind of helps me scratch off the list on different cryptids.
It does. It kind of narrows things down as the description goes. I found this entity especially disturbing and gruesome to me, as I have a very, very, very long night involving this particular creature. And oh boy, was it a pain. Its skin is always a sickish yellow, almost like a jaundicey kind of color, like somebody with jaundice.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's been seen as missing flesh or missing organs, chest open and agape. The head is always strangely attached. Like that's a common
Yeah.
denominator. Like, excuse me, it's always attached, no matter what it looks like. It's always all there. Um, it's been known to wear outdated or clearly tattered and grimy clothes. It's also been seen with extremely dark circles around its eyes and pulled back lips that often reveals a very yellow, dirtyish human teeth, so no fangs. So, based off
Hmm.
this description, what kind of vibes are you getting so far?
Um, most of the accounts I've heard about it, it has often given me kind of like like a specter kind of vibe, because like when you deal with like spiritual entities most of the time, like whether it is maybe like a ghost that has like kind of been corrupted into something else, or like a strange demonic entity, like most of the time when you're dealing with things like that, and if they're malicious in any form, they don't necessarily just kill humans. Like they they
Are you still there?
terrorize you and they drain you of like all your natural energy, and
Uh
like
oh, I
and they
think I
do
lost you.
something else to people. But it always seems like it's just simply breaking you down. And I feel like if you were to die, it would ruin whatever its purpose is of draining you. It would cut off its food source. Uh, but yeah, yep, fantastic. So the wretch, as I saw it, it it seemed like, I guess like the best way I could explain it is it seems like a some kind of spiritual or demonic entity, is like a specter of some
Oh yeah,
sort,
and
because
I
like the patterns that I picked up
yeah,
from the
I can
accounts that
tell you for a fact
I could find,
because this ended up.
it
I'll
seemed
go into the
like
experience
it
after we're
never
done with
truly
what
wanted
I've
to
got
kill
kind of
anyone, even
baseline
though it
here
seems like
of
such an evil
the
entity.
long night that I had with it.
It wanted to
If it's too
train
much
people up.
trouble,
Mhm.
it will leave somebody alone.
Like
If
it,
it's
you know
just
what I
too
mean? Like
much
it wants
trouble
to
and work.
drain of all.
Like, so
Yeah,
most of the
like
people
it will
that most of the
terrorize
accounts and
you.
stuff
It
are
will
people that
like pull all
they do
your
not
natural energy out of
lead
you. It
very
will
busy, high
basically
maintenance
like leave you
lives like
like a
I'm on call
walking
24/7,
husk,
I'm
but it
this, I'm
won't.
that.
It
It
doesn't
doesn't
prefer
mess with people who
for
have
you to die.
high
I feel like that cuts
lives.
off
I
its
mean,
main food
3
source
out of the
somehow.
6 cases that I
If
could
and like
personally
it and it's
find
very
were
specific, like
stay-at-home
obsessive.
mothers
Like if it wants one
or
person, it will
just
just
people
stay
with
with that
no
one
social
person, and it
life
will be
whatsoever that
undistracted
had
from
no
that one
reason to go
individual
out to
until
the
it's done.
club or go
But
hang out after
it
work.
won't
They went
it won't pull in
home,
others.
work, work, home. So these are people that don't really have much going for them, it seems. And I
Okay.
agree that it,
Yeah.
yeah. I only found one instance
Hmm.
of somebody who did lead a busy life that it tried to attach itself to, and it attached itself to her
Oh.
for 6 months, and she saw it. She was a nun. She saw it all around the convent, and it messed with her to the point where it finally left her alone after she spent her long nights when it would prefer to bother her long nights in prayer in a lighted room with other nuns and a priest and a lot of
Hmm.
people around. So it doesn't seem to want to give that psychological factor of I want others to think you're crazy. It more has a thought of I want no one to know
Hmm.
what I'm doing to you. And I thought that was
Right.
kind of
They're in a
strange.
hustle, like a. Hmm.
I thought that was out because everything I found it has more of a predatoristic mode of thinking, whereas yes, it's intelligent. Well, shoo it off, not really. I mean, it took 6 months of her keeping other nuns and other people awake, constantly doing
Mhm.
things, being around her, moving around her. There's no dark spots in the room, things like this. They just basically made it where this thing said, "You're not worth it. I'm hungry," and leaves. So if you can manage to keep it from feeding on somebody, it'll get hungry and just
Mhm.
move off, which I thought was very, very
That is strange.
strange. Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of where I figured that out
Mhm.
after
That's
the
what I keep
main
thinking, especially with
the
that
night I
that
had
new
with it.
account you
So
dropped
I might
there,
as well
because it
just go ahead
sounds
into
almost
that. But let me go into
like
the MO
feral.
of the
Like it's
being first, because
vicious,
we've been
it's
talking heavily,
hungry,
heavily
but
about
you
that,
can
but we
practically
haven't
shoo it off.
explained it
It
to the
sounds like, yeah.
full. So I have wrote in the MO category. This sick and twisted creature has been known to appear and menace, even full blown stalk someone for months, only appearing at inopportune times or appearing just as you seem to have forgotten about it and
Hmm.
are ready to
Yeah.
move on from the sight of this particular creature. And in the air and presence of this creature, it can only be
Ah.
explained as heavy, threatening, hateful, or full of malice. And after
Ah.
sometimes
Okay.
up
So
to
it's almost
months
like
after
using its
first
own avatar
appearing and
against
just
it.
suddenly
Okay.
as it was there,
Hmm.
boom, it's gone again. This creature has been seen entering rooms, and when it's chased into that room, finding that it is no longer present, it seems for some reason, it almost seems like it needs to do this stalking for some unknown reason. It almost seems
Mm.
as
Mm.
as if I could talk, seems to do the stalking for some unknown reason. It's as if it may feed or get pleasure from the actions, but I will get into that at the end of my personal thoughts. So, going on this MO that we've laid out, I will now tell my story of the longest night of my life. The longest night of my life started when I got a phone call from a friend of mine that said, "Hey, I have a demon stalking me." You have a what? A demon stalking me. It's got to be a demon, right? It keeps appearing and disappearing when I least expect it. Like it appeared to me first when I was in the shower.
Okay.
Like, okay, are you sure it's just not a peeping tom in a mask out your window or something? She's like, no, it was
Oh.
in my room, in my bathroom. All the doors are locked, all the windows are locked, nothing's broken, nothing's stolen. I mean, it's just like it just appeared all of a sudden. And just as soon as it appears, on accident. There we go. Just as soon as it appears, it just disappears, is what she told me. So after she called me and like, okay, let me get my bag together and I'll come over. So I threw a bag of clothes and a couple of other different things, some holy water, a cross, a couple of other things in the profession, and went over. And she had every light in the house on, every single light in her 2-story house on. Like, okay, that is strange and wild. So I asked her, what's going on? And the only thing she could tell me is it appears in the dark. It appears in the dark. It appears in the dark. I'm like, okay, she's gone off her cuckoo marbles. I need to call a couple more people. So I called a couple friends over to, console with her and be with her while I figured out what's going on. And just for the heck of it, I turned the hall light off to see what would happen with her sitting in the living room. And with her sitting in the living room and the hall light off, after about 10 minutes of me being in the kitchen making phone calls, I heard her scream, like loud enough I dropped my phone. I run in there and I got the just the glimpse of it stepping back into the shadow. So I got a glimpse of its face moving back into the darkness. And it's there in the hall. Like, what the heck is that thing? So I cleared everybody but her out of the room, and it came back and started menacing again. And I mean, you could feel the air in the room is just pure hate and spite. So after a couple of other people showed up, and my mentor Shiro Fujimoto showing up. He was a priest, Catholic priest. We kind of started rolling down the list of things this could be. So we turned the hall light on with a broom handle because I'm not going in there with that thing. I we ended up getting it into the guest bedroom. There was nothing in the guest bedroom. It was basically an office for her, but she hadn't put anything in it because she's just moving into the house. And we basically set floodlights up and everywhere but this one corner and put her in a chair in the room. And it showed up in that one corner. The first thing Shiro did is he took an entire bucket of water he had just blessed and turned into holy water, dump, and you could see it dripping off of this thing. So it's there. And it just looks up at him with this confused look of like, great, I'm wet. Now what? He pulled out a crucifix. He started giving exorcism rites to it. Nothing. He said, okay, I know what this is. So he pulls out a silver chain and he smacks it with the silver chain. He said he could feel the thump like you had just hit a person. No effect. So he tried to reach out and grab it, and his hand went right through it. So it has a spectral aspect to it, but things can touch it as long as it's not people touching it, it appeared. We did holy scriptures. We did everything in a Catholic priest's arsenal at that point. And nothing seemed to work. The only thing that seemed to work was the only place in the house it could go that was dark was this one room. So we decided, okay, we're going to try something. So we turned the light in the bathroom off and the light in the hallway. We turned that off again as well. And after we turned the lights off, it appeared in the bathroom and then it appeared in the hall. It's just like boom, boom, it's gone, like teleporting. And I thought that was really, really interesting. After about 12 hours of us running around this house, chasing this thing room to room, giving it rites and holy water and blessings and verses, and I keep doing it. Okay, so after chasing it around this house for 12 hours, giving rites, rituals, holy water, yada, 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 everything in a priest's arsenal, it just, poof, ups and leaves. And she's never been bothered by it again. I thought that was really, really interesting, and that's where my longest night of my life come from, because this thing was disturbing. And the entire time, I could never find a single instance of this being talking, but it spoke. I figured that would perk your interest, Nick. So basically, summarizing the story, friend called me. She thinks it's a demon. We chased this thing around for 12 hours that night. Me and my mentor, which is a priest, and a couple of other friends that are, pastors and priests and strong in faiths. And I even had a Norse pagan shaman friend of mine that was with us. Like, we ran around with holy water and pagan charms and crucifix, holy scriptures, holy oil. Like, we went with the works. Nothing bothered it. And you'll find this part really, really interesting, and I think you'll like this part, and it'll perk your ears up, kind of like a Dotson when he's interested. It'll perk your ears up. There is no account of the wretch ever speaking whatsoever, save for this one story of mine. It spoke to me because I carry it's a blade that a friend of mine gave to me, and his whole thing is he was really into the werewolves and the vampires thing, and his whole thing is if it's evil and you cut it with silver, it'll scream in pain. And that thought just popped in my head, so I'm like, okay, Banjo-Kazooie moment, and I pull a knife out. And it's a silver, actual legitimate silver blade. It's a soft metal normally, and it's got an edge on it. It doesn't keep an edge very well, but I still like it. So I reach over there, and I stick it and it goes through it. Like the water will hit it and it's drenched in water and in oil, but if you reach out and grab it or you like try
Oh.
to stab it, it goes right through it. And as I like yeah, it seems that way. But as I like run the blade, it went like right into the forehead area, top of the head area, and it just like it's just sitting there, and I can watch it move, and it just like looked up at me through the blade, like pulls its head up through the blade, and all looks at me, and it got like this demonic looking grin on its face, and in like the most dark gravelly voice, it's like, that tickles, and then it was gone. Just like poof, it's gone. Like this thing looked at me and said, "It tickles. What we've been doing tickles." Oh crap! And it after that it just poof
So
disappeared,
it's not dense
and
enough.
she's never
Huh.
had a problem with it since. But every once in a while, she said she'll walk somewhere. She'll be walking somewhere. Yeah, and
Hmm.
like she said every
Yeah.
once in a while she'll go somewhere or she'll be like standing at line at Walmart or something and she'll just get the smell of rotting flesh and she'll see it. But that is not it because it's never anywhere else and it's in a crowd so it's not matching the MO. And she had some psychology and she realized she's a psychology major, and she basically told me that I know what it is when it's happening.
Mm.
Basically it's a form of PTSD that's not physical, but it's mental PTSD trauma, and it's where something you see something that's not there. Basically, you
Hmm.
like hallucinate
Maybe it
almost,
put on more damage than
but
she
you know
thought.
it's not there, but you think it's
Hmm.
there. If that makes sense. So she still sees this thing. That's how disturbing it was to her. So what do you think about that?
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. That just kind of
It
screams
does.
even more to me like how, some of the I guess like spiritual phenomenon of this kind of entity. Like it's a and like even like aside from the trauma that it can create, it being something that can either
I don't think I
uh,
have.
be like a
I don't think I
physical
have. I'll have to
tangible
look
thing
that one
all
up.
the while not being a physical tangible thing, like all at the same moment. I think that's even why in that one incident where someone reported, as you said, like seeing it one way while another person simultaneously saw it another
Okay.
way. It's almost like that just gives me spiritual vibes,
Yeah.
like because that's kind of like because usually when something is of that nature it tests different perspectives, like one person may be able to see something with
Okay,
full
I'll have to look
fluency
that up.
while someone else can't see it at all. And
Uh,
um what is that story? Have you ever read this story,
yeah, I'll have
the
to
thing
look
in the
that one up
cellar?
and I'll have to read that one
it's
because that
uh
sounds really
it's really
interesting and it
good for
sounds
this
really similar to
actually.
fitting.
It's
But
ah, I may even be able to find you that author,
yeah,
but the thing in the cellar is a story about this entity and the cellar that haunts a boy, and like whenever
yeah, oh yeah,
cellar, yeah, it's really interesting because like
yeah. I heard
no one else
a
can see it,
theory.
no one else can see it, but he it's by
I
David
heard a
H.
theory
Keller.
from a friend of mine
David Henry
that
Keller.
it was actually my
It
brother's
came out
wife, which
in
I
the
was really,
80s,
really
but
surprised because she's not into the
it's
paranormal
a really
thing very
interesting story.
big. And we were
Mhm.
sitting at dinner when I was talking about this at dinner and explained it out. Like my brother has the theory
Yeah.
that it's like
I
some
won't,
kind
just
of
because like I
ancient
want you to
old
read it, like I won't
like
even ruin the
Lovecraftian
whole
style
the
god
deal
of
of it,
like
but
the
like
Fae
you
or
can kind of
something like
associate
that.
that with the wretch
But
when you
my
read through it,
sister,
and like
my
and you kind
sister-in-law,
of
she
get like
looks
it,
at
but
me and she's
it
like,
does say a lot about
you
like
know,
the
this sounds
maybe
a
like
lot
even like
like
the human perspective of
tulpomancy.
how some people are more vulnerable,
Wait a minute. How
or
do you
maybe
know what a
not vulnerable,
tulpa
more
is?
susceptible to seeing
And at
something
this
like
point, it would
this.
be more of an egregore. How do you know what
And it's also
how do you know
strange
what
to me because I feel like
tulpomancy
if it
is?
noticed,
She's like,
oh
oh
yeah,
well, when
what's
I
your
was a
theory?
kid, I practiced tulpomancy without knowing it, and then I ended up unknowingly severing that tie and creating an egregore. And
Oh.
my parents had to call a priest and get it out of the house because I believed that it had turned into a demon. So it was susceptible to things that a demon is. Because the are you familiar with tulpomancy and egregores and all? Are you familiar with all
Mhm.
that? Yeah, it's basically you wish and believe something into will. You believe something so strongly and will it to be that it becomes. And
Mhm.
oh yeah, like a really really famous, not fancy, sorry, famous tulpa
Hmm.
is actually the Slender Man. Like people see him, people hear him, people are taken by him. It's become a real thing. Based off of a story off of dollar store Reddit.
Is this like physical
I think it was called No Sleep
manifestations?
for You
And
or something like that. One of them old 4chans or something like one of them old 90s websites that dealt in horror and horror stories.
yeah, I'm actually very
Yeah,
inspired
pretty
by this because
much. And like it
I've
ended up
seen it
evolving into a
incorporated in
tulpa by
horrors
people
that I've
just
loved, and like
believing it.
it's a rather frightening
And
thing,
she
especially in
basically
reality.
told me that this sounds like a tulpa that has gotten loose and has become what people believe of it, which is really interesting because how old is this tulpa? If it's a
Hmm.
tulpa, let's go with this assumption for a minute. How old is it? Because it's been seen wearing garb from
Hmm.
the Victorian eras, the 1800s, 1600s, something like that, the Victorian era, all
Yeah.
the way to as modern as the 1960s. Like I got a story of uh, one of my
Hmm.
one of my
Yeah, I can't remember
cousins,
if they
friend of
still
a
call it
friend of a
Marble
friend
Hornets
kind of
then,
thing. I
or if
don't
it
really believe
evolved
it,
into that.
but
But yeah.
he told me that he saw a creature matching this description of the wretch that was wearing a GI's clothing from
Hmm.
Vietnam, which is really, really weird because in every single story, I never get a description of the clothes other than they looked out of date and I wasn't concerned with them. I thought that was interesting. Yeah, or tattered and rough and beat up, stained, stuff like that. I thought that was interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's more like people are so menaced and afraid by this thing that they don't care to look at details. It's like a police officer. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. He's totally an Adidas fan. I could smell that cologne and
Hmm.
them terrible running shoes. No, no, no. I'm sorry. They were Reeboks with the strap, and I could hear him playing the song about the boots with the fur.
Oh,
Apple bottom jeans.
interesting.
That's what it was.
That is kind of odd.
And yeah, and Ed Hardy. Ed Hardy. Yes. Yes. But like,
Or tattered and
but yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I got
yeah.
one
Kind of
last
beyond where you can like make a specific
thing to
assumption
throw
about
at
it.
you, then I'm going to throw my final thoughts. Okay. This last story is of a ER nurse,
Yeah, like by
which
the
this
way,
is
he was
the
like an
lady I
Adidas
spoke to.
fan.
I got her permission to use it. I'm not going to use her name, even though she gave me permission to. I'm just not all about that life. I don't want nobody bothering her. She
Yep.
is from up in Nolman, Alaska. She is from Nome, Alaska.
Yeah, yeah. The
She
red
said
smelled
she
like
has
a
since
putrid
moved.
flesh
Her
and
husband
party.
is stationed in the military. So they were there in Alaska for a good little while. She lived in Nome while he was on base.
And then I
She worked
was
at the
certainly
Nome
frightened.
ER. She said that her first encounter with the wretch was that she stepped outside off of hospital property, which is fairly common, to take a smoke break.
Okay,
And
sure.
she saw a
Sure.
guy walk into an alley. She didn't think anything of it, but then she heard loud noises and a gunshot from the alley. Being an ER nurse, she thought somebody's in trouble. She saw somebody duck out of the alley, and when she
Mhm.
ran down the
That's a
alley,
good call.
she saw the wretch sitting there
Mhm.
like pretending he was shot. But when he moved his hands to stand himself up, there was no bullet wounds, there was no blood. She said that he looked like it looked almost like a crackhead. And because she's a trained professional, she said, I'm a trained ER nurse. I've been in the ER for 25 years. I've seen things go down. We've had a shooting in one of our ERs. So I've seen some stuff go down. This legitimately scared me. Scared me to the point where I don't even remember what the face looks like, just the smell and the fear that I had that
Oh.
grabbed me. She said, I dropped my entire pack of cigarettes and ran away. For the next 2 years, and this is the longest stalking of the wretch that I could ever find, for the next 2 years, when her husband would walk out of the door for work, when she'd open the door to go to her car to drive to drive to the ER, she would walk out, and sitting on top of her car would be the wretch. And it would stare her down. And she said it wasn't every day. It was quite frequently. It felt like every day. But I would have to call out that day because I would start getting sick and I would vomit yellow bile. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting. That and it pretended to, she said it pretended to act like it got shot. That's interesting. Like it was pretending to lure her. That's kind of weird. She said after 2 years, her husband finished his last deployment, his last station, and he was not going to re up.
Mm.
When he laid the paperwork on the table and told her, this is my DD 214. For those in the class that don't know what a DD 214 is, this is my discharge papers. When he laid them on the table, she said she looked up at the end of the table and she could see it.
Vomit, yellow
With him in the room,
bile.
she could see it. And as she picked them up, she held them and said, I'm leaving this shithole. And threw them back on the table. And when she
Still
threw them on the
doing
table,
that.
she covered that
Yeah.
chair when she
Yeah.
threw them down, and it was gone. And she's never been bothered since.
Yeah, definitely.
So a little bit of a couple of breaks in MO there. Yeah, but she's yeah, she's had she's had
Go for it.
hypnotherapy over it. She's had all kinds of different psychological therapies and treatments. She has the PTSD to match. Her husband divorced her over the lack of intimacy, took the kids, that kind of thing. I mean, she's got nothing to lose by telling this story. She's got nothing to gain by telling this story because she told me I could use her name. I told her I refuse to. That's your safety, your protection. There's a lot of whack jobs out there. And two, that is a
Yeah,
really
totally.
complex
I
story for
I started
someone to be
tagging him off
so
myself as I
so
heard that
afraid,
account.
trained or not, to throw
Especially
back,
being
to
the
like be able to
smell and
regurgitate
yeah,
constantly.
it's
And she's
very
held the
interesting.
same thing. I spoke with her husband even. She let me speak with her ex-husband. And he told me the same story, that this is what she told me 15 years ago, and this is what I believe of it. This is what I don't. I think she was in that. She watched somebody run out of that alley, and when she ran in the alley, she watched some
Mhm.
crackhead get shot, and the dude bailed, so she went there to save him. and saw something that scared her, and her mind blocked it out and covered it with something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to say it's
Mhm.
real. I'm not going to say it's not. I'm just going to say she claimed to see it. I think it's a wild
Yes.
story. She truly does. You can see the conviction in her face because we did a Discord call, so with video and all, so I could see her face. She had to stop for about 30 minutes because she started to cry at retelling this story. So she full believes it. She fully wholeheartedly believes it, and I mean my heart goes out to her whether it's true or not, because something happened that upset her great enough to the point where she's got this issue.
Mhm. Yeah. Mm. And it truly sounds like she believes this account.
It does. Oh my god. Yes. Yes. They're they are nasty. you, you know
Mhm.
it kind of does. It kind of does. But congratulations, we've now entered the segment where we
Yeah.
go to our final thoughts.
Yeah.
Dun dun
Definitely. And these
dun.
tactics that it used,
So I
it
wrote out an
reminds me
entire
of like
category, and this is the longest section
other like malicious like
of
cryptids and entities out there
the entire thing.
for instance like skinwalkers
So
even
my final thoughts. I
I'm sure you
personally
heard
had a
about
very
like
harrowing night
they
dealing with this
change
creature.
physical
Spent
form,
some
they
time as an
change like
apprentice for an
they can
exorcist and a
mimic
paranormal scholar and hunter.
sounds that they've heard
Did
and
this job
collected
for
in the
3 to 5
past, and
years. I
they
received a
can
wake
mimic
up
you
call
moments
from a
after you
close
talk,
friend who
and they
lived
can
in the. I
use that
already
to
went through the
confuse
town.
other people and
I already went through
ensnare
the
them.
story.
Yeah. And it
So,
sounds
like,
like
we even
guy
used iron
or
and
this
everything. I
thing
already went through the
did
story that
something
I
very
wrote out. I
similar.
forgot that I did that. But I personally believe that this being is what is called a Nokzeren,
Firing
or
off
translated to
thoughts.
English meaning a night eater.
Mm, mm, mm.
Nokzeren. Nokzeren. Well, I'm doing that with a French accent or an accent.
Okay.
It's a German. It's German. Nokzeren. It's like I said, it translates to night eater or night eaters. This entity is a vampiric creature. However, instead of feasting on blood, it feeds on emotions, especially negative emotions such as fear, anger, even pity and
Okay.
loneliness. And it even has the same appearance to match the wretch usually, as
Right.
damage that it took in life is reflected in death. Some of the characteristics and mannerisms, and even some of the same abilities that the wretch shows, save for the
A
ability to seem
night
as if it's
eater.
transparent or not to certain people, that can be explained by poor lighting or a lack of well recorded documentation, as the reports and lore on these creatures are very old and unfortunately incomplete. So the Night Eaters have incomplete lore, so we don't know if that's one of their abilities or not for sure. But there's nothing specifically stating they can or cannot. So it's a question mark, but everything else matches the same. Now, I personally wholeheartedly believe this is a Noxerin, as to me, in my mind, it fits the best, as these creatures are created by most commonly after a suicide, sometimes after an accidental or wrong death. According to Germanic folklore, a person does not become a Noxerin from being bitten or
Hmm.
scratched. The transformation happens after death, and it is not communicable. So it's not contagious. You don't bite somebody and they become one either. Noxarians are also related to sickness and disease, and some lore even states that they can be created during or after a violent and or sickness-related death. I would personally call meth and
Right.
drugs in general to be considered as sickness and or a disease. So this could be some drug addict from 200 years ago that died of an overdose that was so violent and so
Mm.
messed up and wrong that they've risen from the dead as a Noxain. Another thought that was presented to me was the possibility of this creature being a wraith. As lore states that holy water, exorcism rites, and as well as having an aversion to light and holy symbols and commands from a holy man or woman would do nothing, as well as which brought up the question, why would a wraith, a very rare being in folklore, want to hunt and stalk a woman who have already been through trauma, such as sexual assault,
Yes.
stalking, predatory behavior of low down dirty rats? And I specifically wrote that in there because of the fact that I personally feel that I don't even like to call them men. Those of the male species who do these things,
Right.
I
Huh.
personally, I'm a good old Southern hick boy. Drag them out back and shoot them. No, because then that gives them a thinking of, well, this is just how men are. And we've seen that in society and culture over time. Like how many women are walking around saying, these men ain't nothing. All these men are the same. I mean, no, we're not. Quit looking at the bar for a husband. You might fix some of your issue. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not here to attack nobody. So after digging into the lore and reading many books, oh my god, I read probably 400 books in the past month alone on wraiths and listening to stories,
Mm-hmm.
the simple answer is fear. They feed off of negative emotions. Fear. They feed off of negative emotions. And lore states that fear in particular, that it's the easiest for a being that feeds off of them to create and to induce. Not to mention, most lore on such things state that it is one emotion that seems to be everywhere in mass quantity.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my conclusion, I personally believe that this being the wretch is either a Noxain or night eater or a wraith or a wraith of some kind. So that concludes my final thoughts. So Nick, what are your final thoughts on the wretch?
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah. I personally believe uh I kind of bounce back and forth because like every time I hear a little bit more of different accounts, it just slaps me in another spot. But
okay.
ultimately, I do think this is a spiritual entity like caused
Interesting.
by like some kind of
Interesting.
traumatic death that needs resolution that can never find it. And I
Yeah.
may even shift over on my other side that might be on the more like physical, tangible side would be the rake, actually, oddly enough.
Right, right.
Because like there's actually been a report, like since this thing's so um it's so capable of making people feel traumatized like to the point of suicide. It literally makes me think of that one account like back in the 60s with the wretch, not the wretch, the rake, that like
Yeah.
someone actually mentioned the monster in a suicide note. And he did commit suicide. It was like I would definitely want to fact check that one more deeply, but like as many like of the rake reports go, like it's like you even have to like go into the evidence and like make sure that's like a
Yeah, where's
substantial report or if it's not just a
usually
made
wears
up letter.
clothing.
But I do believe
Yeah.
it was a very convincing one for me. Like, and it was a little more detailed than a lot of the other rake scenarios I've heard so far. But yeah, I get vibes from that because the rake is also like kind of essentially a cryptid that is terrifying, and it terrifies people. It's slender. It has
Yeah, I
like
noticed
a
that. I noticed that as
retractive
well.
lips and bulbous, darkened
I
eyes
found two
with
different
like
types
little
of
white pearls in
artwork
the middle,
that some
usually.
people have
And
put
like,
out there. It's either like a
it
rake
sounds
esque
vaguely familiar. Like, I guess like the
zombie
only
looking
thing that I
creature
would
or just a full out
discount, I
zombie.
guess, for that in the comparison is
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
the
Like I saw
wretch
somebody
like
took
wears
a
some
picture of the
form of
rake that
cloth,
somebody had
whether it be
drawn
tattered
and then
clothing
like
or
colored
a lot
it
of the
in to
reports
match
seem
the
to aim
color of
for form of
jaundice colored
clothing. Yeah,
skin.
while the rake is just like butt
Yeah.
naked.
And it's like
And
I personally don't
but
believe in the
yeah,
rake.
but
That's
I
kind of my
can't
personal belief.
help
I think
but
that if I
think of like,
remember
even when
correctly, I
I
did
like
a deep
see
dive
some of
into it years and years ago,
like,
and the
like
base start that I
the
could find
artist
was
imagery
the
for
same contest where
like
the
the retro
Slender
little
Man
bits I
came
found,
from
they
was
always
the
kind of lead
rake.
back to like a rake
And
look, like that whole like
I think it
animalistic
would
but
be, well, at
clever
this
looking
point,
creature.
Slender Man
Yeah.
is more of an egregore, and I would say the rake is so that as much. But how they would have to be so believed
Hmm.
and so
I think
believed
I've even
in
seen a clip where
that
it straight
they
up
can
was a rake.
physically interact with people and physically be. Because I mean, we have a
Yeah.
legitimate Wisconsin court case that came out of my previous
Right.
co-host Bob, his
Glorified it a little
town.
bit more in that
It was like a
direction.
town or two over,
Yeah.
the nature preserve where those two girls killed their friend in the name of Slender Man to see him.
Mm.
Like that happened on my best on one of my friends, my old co-host back door. Like it's wild,
I
man.
was just about
And
to
like
say
I
that.
have
Like,
he's talked
maybe
about
like
it
it could be
because
a tulpa
he
situation.
almost ended up on that jury. He almost ended up on that jury, but they discounted him because he has a lack of mobility with his knees. He can't get up and down, up and down, up and down in the chairs to leave and stuff like that a lot. So they just dismissed him. He said they probably would have chosen
Hmm.
me for that jury if it weren't for my knees. He said, I'm so glad
Correct.
I didn't get chosen for that trial when it all came out because I probably would have cried in the courtroom because that is just so sad and so bad. And
Hmm.
well, I mean, if you're crying because of it's a disturbing
Oh
thing, I
wow.
mean, that's one thing, but it was it's I I I I
Oh.
personally don't agree with the sentencing they gave them, but I personally don't agree with the fact that here at the middle end of last year, they
Hmm.
let one of the girls out of the psychiatric hospital. I don't know what happened to
Hmm.
her after that. I didn't care enough. I just saw they were releasing her, and I'm just like, oh my god,
Yeah, and
just
they would
wow.
probably just took him off the
That
case.
wasn't that long
Yeah,
ago. I think
they
it
were
was
like,
like what
okay, this guy is
2012
has a
maybe.
bias. Like, we got to take him off.
Yeah, that's all you can say. It's just like, oh my god, wow, just wow.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I couldn't
oh
see
my
a court
god,
being able to morally
that
go
was a
on with
bad
that.
case. I remember when that happened.
That's just too
I
torturous.
my heart broke for that because at that point to me it was still just some silly story on the internet and I'm like, how crazy do you have to truly be to believe that this thing is real? And then I had a cousin of mine call me 6 months later. He's like, dude, you're not gonna
Oh,
believe what I just saw. Crap.
okay.
He told me he was working in a construction area. They were digging up
Wow.
old natural gas pipes and replacing them.
That's all I can
And
kind
he
of say
said,
in
"We're
reaction
out
is
here in
just
the middle of the
wow.
boonies, out here in the Ocala National
Mm,
Forest in Florida." And one of the kids that was working with us, he's brand new, fresh out of high
mm.
school, and he just keeps blabbering on and on and on and on and on about this slender guy. And then all of a sudden, it's dark out here, and he said, "Howdy doody boy, come running right across the street." And we're like, "Nope." And we all left and went home. So my cousin saw this thing run across the street, like tentacles flaring and all. He's like, no, no.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
at that point, I then got serious of like, what could this be? And then about the time that I'm really starting to care about this subject because I'm like, I never found an answer all those years ago. I think I'm going to look into what this could be. So I go to type into my YouTube chat where I get a lot of fun topics to jump off points from. I see Talking with Shadows has released a new episode. I'm like, okay, what with this? They did an episode on Slender Man where they talked about him being a internet tulpa. And I'm like, this matches so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. You've cracked the case, Watson. So, elementary, my dear Watson. Elementary.
Mm.
D- it's become something.
Mm-hmm. It's totally elementary. Oh, yeah, yeah. I like it. It, it's something that frightens me when it comes to like stuff like that is the idea of
Something,
manifestation. Because
yeah.
I do
And
agree. Like, there's no way that like Slenderman was not
yeah, I
made
also
up. Like
toyed with the
it was
idea for
totally
a good
made
little
up.
while of
But like
the
I
fact that
do
Slender
also
Man
agree.
is
Like when
just like
people,
a demon
yeah,
that is
because
out
there's
there in the
something about
wild that has internet
like
connection.
it's within everyone. I personally believe
And
like
it's
is
like,
like
this seems
the
like a good way to
actual
terrorize
like
the human
spiritual energy.
beings.
It doesn't matter
So
if you're
adopts that
like
form.
if you are
Which, I mean,
in
anything is
organized religion
possible.
out of it, if you believe in something, believe in absolutely
Or,
nothing, if you have like a high density amount of spiritual energy and whatever you do, and if you do like some crazy like ritual,
oh, yeah.
including murder, like you are bound to be knocking on the door of something
Oh, yeah.
very very wrong, and yeah, and you will make something of that.
Yeah, and then like I know me personally, when I talked about my introduction story, what got me into all of this, I specifically made
Mm-hmm.
sure I stated that I the being that I saw was probably not
Yeah.
what it actually looked like, but that was how my mind
Mm-hmm.
could
I was thinking something
perceive
very
it
similar.
without
Like, oh, this is
breaking
gonna be
my
my
mind.
mask. This is how I'm gonna want them to see me. You know,
So
just like how like a lot of
and
even in stories you'd hear like things like
yeah,
how would you
yeah,
prefer to see me? It's
exactly.
like usually
And
how
like
like a
that's
lot
a
of these films
common
would
thing in a lot of the
like
Slender
talk to you,
Man
whether it be
myths
like a
is that
demon or
like
like some kind
you
of
see
angelic figure.
him, you
Like
like lose
how
your
do you
mind if
prefer
he
to
leaves you
see
to
me?
live.
Is like how some of them would say, which you also would get
So
like if it
for
was like
all we
a
know,
malicious being, like,
for
oh nope,
for
I'm
all
not
we
gonna
know,
ask
it
you. I'm
could
just
be a
gonna change up,
legitimate like
and you're just gonna have
dark
to wonder
demon
yourself what
out
the
there
hell I
running
am.
around out there in the woods of who knows where, BFE or whatever, that is legitimately snatching kids up for some reason. Like I don't know what a demon wants with a kid, but whatever. It could be. It could be the fear aspect. It could be the to
Mm-hmm.
drive up wedge in the family and
Mm-hmm.
shatter that
As many of those
family. Because I
Lovecraftian
mean, if there's
stories
one
like to
thing that the
go.
devil loves to do, it is mess with the family dynamic when they're
Mm-hmm.
healthy. That
Absolutely. So like yeah,
oh yeah, uh, oh yeah, humans and
right.
human children like under the age of 10 or so, and animals. Like I know I have
Sponges to
seen
the innocence.
I used to work very closely with a lot of the game wardens and stuff. Like I've know every game warden in our area. I'm
Absolutely.
a hunter. I like hunting. I love going out there and just
Mm-hmm.
being in the woods. I like just hanging
Mm-hmm.
around. I like driving, that kind of thing. So I'm in the woods a lot. So
Yes.
I get to know every game warden around.
And
And
entities
they
like
like,
that, they
hey,
want to be
take a look at
seen,
this real quick. And
and
then,
like
they'll pull up
children
their phone where they got a trail camera or
are
something where they're
reportedly
keeping
like
track
some of
on
the most
panther
susceptible
population or,
of like
panther
the human race when it
population
comes
or
to like
on
identifying and
black bear
perceiving something like
population
that,
or deers or
because they
whatever.
still have so
And
much about them that
one of
hasn't
them
yet
showed
been
me
jaded or
a
tampered
footage
with.
of a guy who's like, he's standing next to the feeder. This dude looked like disheveled and messed up, and a bear come walking through there, and like immediately it got like 100 yards from him. You could see it lift its head, and you could see the eyes on this bear get massive, and it just like full on Scooby-Doo backpedaled and bolted. Now, black bears in this area, if you get within 100 feet of a black bear in Florida, one of two things is going to happen. Either it's going to stand up and growl at you or make a noise to you, make its presence known, or it's just going to turn around and leave you alone. Because the bears here are very tame. That doesn't mean, ooh, it's a floof, pet it. No, 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 dear God, no. That's how you
Okay.
lose a hand in your life. But they leave you alone. If you're walking down through the woods or whatever, they'll just veer off and leave you alone. So for a bear to backpedal and get scared like that, I don't want to know what's out there walking around near them feeders and stuff. I don't care. Not my problem. Not my monkey. Not my circus. Bye. I asked him. I asked him where this is.
Oh, that's so bizarre.
No, no, especially not black bears. Especially not black bears. What they may what they have a lack of in
Hmm.
size because they're fairly small around here for a bear. They make up in for ferocity because they are vicious. If they get a hold of you, you ain't living. If it decides it wants you, you're done.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Okay.
But we got off topic so bad.
Right.
It happens. It's yeah,
Exactly. Because
yeah.
like last time I checked,
So
bears
what
don't
are your
usually
final
get
thoughts?
stunted
Getting back to the topic, what are
and
your
like
final
startled
thoughts
by
on the wretch?
anything like people. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. It's no worries. It was just our final thoughts, and like it was a nice segue. I think even
Yeah,
on the previous concept about
I
like
can
just on the
see
two
that.
bullets, like break
I can see
versus
that. I can see that a lot,
like
and I kind of
spiritual
agree
like
with the
entity.
spiritual
Like
aspect of it because
I
in Germanic
definitely would aim
folklore,
for a spiritual entity. I do personally believe,
Nosferatu, I'm sorry,
just as he
the
stated in
Night
some of those other
Eaters
reports that were
are
stated, like
very
I do
spiritual
think this is a
based.
suicide-made
Like they're
creature.
extremely
Um,
spiritual creatures. They were
I
born of a
think this is something
spiritual
that's made
problem.
from
They
something
are a
traumatic,
spiritual problem.
and it ends up
And like the only
existing
way that I could personally find to
unknowing
get them
of
to
how to
go away
survive
is two
except
ways:
satiating these impulses.
extreme light
And like even though it
constantly
doesn't
during the
like I
nighttime
personally feel
hours,
like it probably doesn't even
or
understand what it is itself.
to
It's just like
starve them to
this
the point where
embodiment of pain
you are no longer a
that can
concern of
only
theirs.
be
They get
fixed
so
by
hungry they're just
feeding
like,
on
you're not
others,
worth it, and leave.
similar
Who
to
does that
like the
sound like?
appetite of a wendigo.
Because every single story of the wretch, when a light is turned on, it disappears. That's wild. I
Hmm.
think this is a truly dark. I don't want to say demonic, but it's a truly dark, evil spirit for sure. And a
Right.
night eater sounds perfect.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Agreed.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Hmm. I think what frightens
Agreed.
me the
And
most
like
about this guy.
one of the things that I
Mm,
thought was
yeah. Yeah, now you
really
exactly
interesting
sounds
going
perfect.
along
I think
that
it's like
line is the
it's
fact
truly
that
frightening to think of something where you
when
don't even know
it
how
leaves someone
far
who's dealt
it
with it,
goes
they
or the true
usually
nature
are
of like
either
how it even
broken or
exists.
fearful for a long time.
Because like
Like it
it could be
it
a
sticks
multitude of
with them the
things,
rest of
and
their
you
life,
and
even though it's
the
gone.
victims are
And
left not
that's not
understanding
just a oh
what may be the
trauma thing. That's not
full
a I have
like entirety of
PTSD
what they're
issue.
dealing with.
That's a
They
this
might not just
caused
be
a
trauma. They might have lost
problem
some of their
that is
spiritual energy to this
permanent
thing, or
almost.
they may,
I mean,
like
like
once they enter the
the only
afterlife,
way
it
that you could
may
probably get rid
ensnare
of
them.
something like
Like
that
you
is to
never really
mentally
know when
block
you're
it
dealing
out,
with
and that is
something like
such a
this
task
how
that it's
far it
not
will
even
go
funny
and what
because
where
you
it
don't control
stops.
what you block out when you block stuff like that out. You don't just say, "Oh, this is a bad memory, I'm going to remove it," like a picture. Yeah, like it's not a picture in your art gallery. It's not a painting on your wall. You can't just take that one out. You could take all of them out. You could forget completely who you are because you've blocked it. And even
Hmm.
though you have blocked it, it still may bleed through in your
Absolutely.
dreams, in your subconscious, when you're vulnerable, when you're just in the shower thinking. It may bleed through, and that's things that's not that's dangerous. And then even then, yeah, even then, I was about to say I was about to say, let's say someone manages to mentally block that out, that issue they
Right.
had with them. They're standing in the shower,
Yep.
5, 10 years
And
later,
once you start
and then a
feeling trauma,
single
it
thought,
puts you there.
image of
Yeah.
that face comes
Hmm.
back, and now they run all the way through that
Yeah.
again,
Ugh,
like it's the very first time all over again.
absolutely. Hmm.
Yes. And yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't even think it's possible to mentally block something like that out, in my personal opinion, but I'm not
Hmm.
a psychologist. I'm not an expert. I don't know.
Yeah. You can try your best to forget it. Mm-mm. Absolutely. It could just be one image that reminds you, and you're there again. It could be years later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
I don't think so. Yeah, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I don't think it's possible. And I mean, I know one person in particular, one story that they flat out say in the years after they've lost
Yep.
their faith
Reliving it all over
in
again.
in
Yep.
in God because of it,
Yeah.
in the
That's
Christian
what,
God
like, how do you
because of
forget
it.
that?
And it's
You know?
like I've lost my faith because how could something so evil and dark happen
Hmm.
to one of his children? And that's not his
Yeah.
fault. That is
It
one thing that I
forces you to
tell
find
everybody.
like other
A
means,
bad
I'd
thing
imagine.
happening
Yeah. Like you'd have to
just
find,
because
I
you're a
guess, like
child of
some kind
God
of
doesn't mean it's
mental
his fault. He
resolution to put
specifically
yourself at
states,
peace.
I
That's the
don't
only
do
thing I
these
could
things to
imagine,
you.
like something that you can always kind of
And
use to
that's
combat
that's
it
just
every
a
time you think
note I
about
wanted
it.
to hit
But
there
like,
just for a
but
moment. I don't know. I feel
forgetting,
like I
I
needed to
don't
hit
think it's
that for
even
some reason.
possible.
I just kind of feel like I needed to smack that yeah, smack that into the wall real quick.
Hmm.
Yeah, right. Just like Jesus ain't gonna never do nothing bad to you. G drop. I just showed how white I am right there. Oh my god. I just showed how white I really am. God, that was terrible. I apologize to everyone in the rap and hip hop culture. I apologize from the bottom of my heart. Oh my
Hmm.
god. The burning vanilla bean. Oh my
Ding.
god. Burning vanilla ice.
Yeah, that sounded like a good mic drop to me.
Then it sounds like we're the Catholic Church coming back for hip hop. Oh god, let's not do that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. God, no. That was a terrible joke. I need
It
to edit that
was
out. I'm gonna edit that out. That was bad. I'm sorry.
it was it was perfect.
You're welcome. I have terrible humor. It's either really
Oh man.
dark or really dry. kind of like my
Yes,
ex.
we will for the next episode. We will
Oh,
change this
that was a
episode to the burning
burn.
vanilla bean.
Well, welcome back to the burning veil, where we burn you, and
Oh,
not in a fun way.
we'll take that out.
Yeah, but
Oh no,
I think
no,
that's
no.
kind of all we got. So I mean, I think that's a wrap up on that. Do you have anything more you want to add or say about the wretch,
No,
or?
we don't need a crusade.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and I agree 100%. Be safe, but then again, I'm also of the same mind of I am a concealed weapon holder, and I agree with I think it's Marcus D on Talking with Shadows. I'm surprised more cryptid and demon stories don't end with
Yeah,
and then I whipped out my
it's just
gun.
my quiet like head going down.
Like Bigfoot throwing rocks at your cabin. Then I whipped out my gun. Bigfoot throwing rocks at your cabin. You know, a wolf man runs across the road, and then I whipped out my gun.
Oh.
It would do no good against the latter because, you know.
Such a burn, such a burn. Yeah, we weren't a burn. Absolutely. This was I guess I would just end it with like if anyone listening to the
I
show
now want a
encounters anything they
sitcom.
would consider, anything like this. If you hear something in the alleyway, if you see something in a parking lot that doesn't seem quite right, just walk
Yes,
away
I now want
because
like
you
a
might
Two and a
not be
Half
able
Men style
to ever
sitcom of
get
me,
past
you,
this.
and like
Just avoid it.
whoever
Don't
else
risk
we
it.
want to like
Be
go around
safe.
ghost hunting around the U.S. where I'm trigger happy and you're negotiation happy. I mean, like the first episode. Yeah, like the first episode, like opens like the pilot episode opens with you trying like pouring tea and trying to negotiate with a werewolf.
Right?
Like, would
Just
you
like
like Earl
pulling out
Grey?
Kelly. Then I whipped out my gun.
Like, yeah, I've got a Tommy gun and I'm just firing at the bushes, and then I stop and a raccoon runs out. You know, like,
Well, that's why we're gonna make good balance because I'm like a hardcore negotiator.
yeah,
Like even when it's probably not
yeah. I
advisable.
mean,
But so
I
like
now want
I'm
a
always like the
sitcom
kind of
of
guy that
this,
like
and like,
I see something that's
oh my
like it
god,
looks like it's
that's
slimy
amazing.
and like creepy and like
We
it's
definitely are
gurgling
going to have to do
outside,
a
and
lot
I'm like,
more.
hey buddy, hey, hey,
We're
are you
definitely going to
okay?
have to
Are
do
you
a.
hungry? I'm not gonna touch you because you're probably
And
gonna
I
kill
mean,
me,
like,
but
I
I'm just
can
gonna leave this
see
out here.
like
Please don't curse
one
my
part of
house.
the episode is like we're out in the middle of the boonies
But
somewhere, and we're
because
like,
like I'm always
you're
afraid that like if
negotiating
I'm
with
the
a
guy that
werewolf. I'm
whips the
loading
gun
guns,
out,
and
then
Bigfoot
it's
walks up.
like
What y'all
I'm like,
doing on
oh,
my
I
front
have
lawn?
officially put a
Take a
bullet in it,
shotgun,
and it was
Bigfoot. We
actually
have
just trying to
werewolves to
have a
hunt.
conversation with me,
Like,
and now I am the one under
okay,
attack.
racks around. Oh no, we want him on our team. If he runs out of
Oh, that
ammo,
would
he
be
can just run
good.
up there and rip him in half. I mean,
That would be pretty cool. Yeah, like, oh, hold on. Who
then
gave
we
this
get
guy
then we
shells? Who
get
gave this
half of
guy
an Arnold
shells?
Schwarzenegger movie. Yeah, then we get an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie when Bigfoot drops the gun. Like, I'll put that cookie down.
Gideon's been shooting at the bushes for 15 minutes. This is out of control.
Yeah, like yeah,
Yeah.
throws him down a ravine. Bye bye,
Straight up
Benny.
scene from the Predator, just leaves flying everywhere, bullet tracers shooting through everything.
That's so terrible. It's hilarious.
Yes. It was a cryptid
I think we are
firefight.
at the end of this, so let me go
We
ahead.
will. We will. I'm getting a good vibe. Yes. You better sit this one out, Sasquatch. Yeah. Oh, we were worried, but then he threw a boulder at it again. Always. Always. Yeah. He like put someone on a trunk and like goes, stick around. Oh boy. Yeah. All right. I think we're at the end of the line, my friend.